Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna everyone. Welcome to today's study of the Srimad Bhagavad-Gita. We are reading from chapter 8, entitled Attaining the Supreme, text 23. Yatra kale tve anavritim avritim chaiva yogina prayata yanti tam kalam vakshami bharata sabha. Word to word meaning: yatra, at which, kale, time, to, and, anavritim, no return, avritim, return, cha, also, eva, certainly, yoginaha, different kinds of mystics, prayataha, having departed, yanti, attain, tam, that, kalam, time, vakshami, I shall describe, bharata shabha, O best of the Bharatas. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. O best of the Bharatas, I shall now explain to you the different times at which, passing away from this world, the yogi does or does not come back. Purport. The unalloyed devotees of the Supreme Lord, who are totally surrendered souls, do not care when they leave their bodies or by what method. They leave everything in Krishna's hands and so easily, happily return to Godhead. But those who are not unalloyed devotees and who depend instead on such methods of spiritual realization as Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Hatha Yoga must leave the body at a suitable time in order to be sure of whether or not they will return to the world of birth and death. If the yogi is perfect, he can select the time and situation for leaving this material world. But if he is not so expert, his success depends on his accidental passing away at a certain suitable time. The suitable times at which one passes away and does not come back are explained by the Lord in the next verse. According to Acharya Baladev Vijayabhushana, the Sanskrit word kala used herein refers to the presiding deity of time. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Panchakalpa tarubhyasya kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. First of all, I humbly seek all of your blessings so that I can speak for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada and my spiritual master and the gathered Vaishnavas, and also for my own purification. So, we are reading from chapter 8, Attaining the Supreme. So, we have seen the beginning of the chapter, Arjuna's questions, and followed by Krishna's answer. So that is from covering text 1 to 4. And from 5 to 8, Krishna gives the method how to remember him at the time of death. From 9 to 13, Krishna explains about the Yoga Mishra Bhakti. And again, here also remembering Krishna, how one can indulge in Yoga Mishra Bhakti, and they can still remember Krishna. And 14 to 16, Krishna speaks about the pure bhakti and remembrance of him. And 17 to 20 is the comparison between the material world and the spiritual world. And from this section to the end of the verse, 23 to 28, is the supremacy of the bhakti in attaining Krishna. So how to attain Krishna? So in this particular verse, Krishna is telling that what would be the different times when a yogi leaves the body that would facilitate him either to return to spiritual world or return back to the world of birth and death. So here we see the mechanism of how the soul is leaving this material world. It depends upon so many factors. The factors of the time, the factors about the sun moving in which direction, and it also depends upon the fire god, and it also depends upon in light. So this is a science how, which is relating to the soul's departure. So the concepts of Uttarayana and Dakshinayana will be spoken in the next coming verses. So when the sun is traveling in the towards the northern hemisphere, that is the Uttarayana. So this is a very good time, very auspicious time, considered to be very auspicious time. And not only that, when it is the waxing moon, Sukla Paksha time. And that is the time if a yogi who is perfect, if he can manage to leave his body at that particular time, he will go back to the, he leaves the material world and either heads towards the Brahmajyoti or further up. But if someone leaves the body when the sun is traveling towards the south, which is the Dakshinayana period, or in the waning moon, which is the Krishna Paksha, and that time the soul has to come back to this material world, which is full of, which is the place of misery and life cycle of birth and that is there. So the yogis who are not imperfect, but they're imperfect, but even though they're imperfect, but accidentally if they leave at a particular, this good times, these auspicious times, still they can go to Brahmajyoti. This is a good thing. But what if they don't leave the body, they're imperfect and they don't leave the body. They have to take rebirth. So the perfect ones are usually the jnanis and the yogis, and the imperfect ones are usually the karmis, because they cannot go beyond it. And in the purport, Prabhupada opens the statement saying that unalloyed devotees of the Supreme Lord, they do not care when they have to leave the body and what method. Why? Because their focus is not to just leave the material world, but their focus is to engage in devotional service to Krishna. And they know that the devotional service to Krishna can be performed perfectly in the spiritual world. Here you have so many impediments, and material world is not the place. So the pure devotee is preparing himself to leave to back the Godhead, but understanding that my actual home is spiritual world, not the material world. So to engage there in devotional service, not in a fear of the material world. Whereas the jnanis and yogis, they have this understanding that material world is miserable place, so I need to leave here. I have to leave this place. And we see, I have taken an example from Srimad Bhagavatam about King Parikshit. So when King Parikshit was informed about the imminent death, that he's going to be leaving the body within 7 days, he gets a notice of 7 days by the curse of the Brahmana boy. So he regarded this news as a good news, because he understood that, okay, now is the time I can really focus on my actual purpose of my life. And then he put aside everything, and then he wanted to return back to Godhead. And when he got this news, what did he do? He went on the banks of the Yamuna, and then he retired himself. He went to the banks of the Yamuna, and he focused himself in the devotional service on to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he perfectly understands that no other self-realization process would help me to go back to Godhead. And seeing his sincere desire, Sukadeva Goswami also comes. It is, Srila Prabhupada speaks in the 4th canto in one of the purports saying that the spiritual master comes when seeing the desire of the disciple. If the candidate is ready to take up to the spiritual process, the Krishna himself, he sends the spiritual master. So even in the case of King Parikshit, Sukadeva Goswami comes and he facilitates giving the Srimad Bhagavatam. He makes sure that Sukadeva Goswami hears and chants until he leaves the body. So after he recited the whole Srimad Bhagavatam to Sukadeva Goswami, he gives a final instruction to Parikshit Maharaj. He says, you constantly meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And how you apply your clear and logical intelligence that carefully considering yourself separate from this material body. By doing so, even if the snake bird, whatever the taksha, the Brahmana boy has created, even the bird comes and bites you, you won't be affected. And the agents of death won't touch you because you are not the material body, but you are actually the spirit soul. So Sukadeva Goswami also illustrates giving so many examples. One of the example he gives is, you will have an experience exactly as in a dream. You will be seeing your head cut off. So how can you see your head cut off and your head is cut off, but you are able to see? What does it mean? So you're in the dream and you're present, and before you, it is your body and the head is cut off. That means there is a distinction that is applied, right? Normally we cannot expect that to happen, that we are present and still our head is cut off and we are able to see. We won't be able to perceive unless we are separate from the material body, and when we see the head is cut off, that is the only time you can see. So he uses many examples, and out of it I just took only one. And he's preparing Parikshit Maharaj to leave the body. And Srila Prabhupada says that the real death is when the soul is covered by the material consciousness. It is the material illusion that is actually considered to be the death, but not the otherwise, because the soul is never dies. The soul is changing several material bodies and it's going through the transmigration in the material world. And then there is the bhakti, which is helping us to transcend this transmigration into many material bodies and go. And so there is a system, there is a Varnashrama system where every man and woman is trained for this purpose. So as we see in the case of Parikshit Maharaj, although he was a king, he renounced and he went and he utilized his life. And a similar example also from Dhruva Maharaj, when he was boarding the transcendental plane that is sent by Vishnu, the Vaikuntha, which has descended from the Vaikuntha. When he was about to board the plane, he saw the death personified was coming towards him. And he had no fear. He just stepped onto the death personified and he boarded the plane. What does it mean? He's stepping on the death personified. That means he was ready to give up the material body and he was accepting. Simultaneously, he accepted the spiritual body and he left to the spiritual world. So he didn't care for the death. So where is these devotees getting this confidence from? The confidence is that, as how Prabhupada is saying, they do not care about how they leave their bodies or what method, because they leave everything in Krishna's hand. So when we practice bhakti, the bhakti gives this conviction and confidence that Krishna will take care of us. And this is what Prabhupada is emphasizing. And this is what even Krishna is emphasizing. And he's going to show us, even though the yogis are preparing themselves to leave at a particular time, and they make all these endeavors to leave at a perfect time and a perfect place. But if they miss the point, they will return back to the material world. Whereas in the text 28, Krishna says that simply by performing devotional service, he will attain the results of all the studying the Vedas, performing austerities, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. This is all part ingrained in the bhakti itself. You don't need to perform anything. So for you, Arjuna, you don't need to get bewildered because you are a pure devotee already. And when we see this passing of a devotee and non-devotee, oftentimes it is challenged that, what if a devotee lives in a car accident, or if a devotee is living by so much material suffering that is happening to the body? How can you say that the non-devotee and devotee are living the same? Then Srila Prabhupada gives a very famous example. He often quotes this analogy of a cat carrying the kitten. A cat is carrying a kitten and a cat is carrying a rat. They both are in the same situation, same position externally. They both are in the mouth of the cat. But the cat which is carrying the kitten is experiencing different feeling because it is having the experience of affection. Whereas the rat is going through the emotions of fear and death. So they're two different, although externally they look the same. So I was wanting to tell this example because we want to compare about the yogis who are not yet devotees, but they leave to Brahmajyoti, what is the situation of them, and the yogis who also leave for Brahmajyoti, but they do not have any respect for devotional service. So we see in Bhagavad-Gita there are different yoga systems explained. Karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, hatha yoga, and bhakti yoga. So yoga means there is a yoga ladder. So this is compared to the yoga ladder. And the whole yoga ladder is connected to Krishna. All the systems are coming back to Krishna. It is not that one has invented. They all are there, present. But it is to facilitate different people at different levels. And then Prabhupada gives an example. Person who is in Krishna consciousness is like on the topmost floor of the apartments. But others may be on the 5th floor, 50th floor, or 500th floor. But the whole thing is part of the yoga ladder. So they all are connected. But again, they all are not equal. So all the yogis, all the people practicing at different levels, they are not equal. But they are part of the process. Because this is the system created by Krishna. So what is happening in bhakti yoga? What are we doing? As the devotees, when we engage our senses and mind in the service of the Rishikesha, who is the master of all the senses, there are two side effects of it. One, we get rid of all the material contaminations and designations. On the other hand, our senses and mind are purified that we are completely engaged in Krishna. So bhakti means action, not inactiveness. And the yogis who are not offenders, but they don't have inclination towards Krishna, what happens to them? They are slowly elevating themselves to go step by step in this yoga ladder process. So one starts with, maybe say the jiva is starting at the karma yoga level. So they take up to sakama karma. So where they have desires, they want to enjoy their desires, they perform karma yoga for that reason. And slowly there is purification because it is coming through the regulation of the shastras. And then they perform nishkama karma yoga, where they don't want to enjoy anymore. They're performing karma, but they're not so much interested in their fruits. Then they are elevated to jnana yoga, where they're acting on the platform of the knowledge. And if the yogi is desiring here, he can go to the Brahmajyoti. So these are the yogis who become an expert at selecting the time and situation, and then they go to the Brahmajyoti. But if someone is more advanced, they go to the Dhyana Yoga, where actually they start meditating on who is the supreme controller. And they come to the Ashtanga Yoga, where there is a practical application of this yoga system. So they are understanding Krishna as the Paramatma. And finally they come to the Bhakti-yoga, where he actually understands above the Brahman concept there is Paramatma, above the Paramatma is the Bhagavan, and they have the self-realized understanding of the Bhagavan. So they also go back to the spiritual world. But the yogis who are also jnanis, who are also much better than the karmis, but they don't have any regard for the Supreme Lord, as how the Brahma is glorifying Krishna in the Garbhastuti prayers. Ye anya aravindaksha vimukta maninas taya asta bhavat avisuddha buddhaya aruhya krichena parampadam tata patyanti adho nadrit yushmad anangraha. So the yogis who may elevate themselves to Brahmajyoti, but they don't have any regard to the Lord's lotus feet or any regard towards the devotional service. What happens to them? Because their intelligence is so impure that they fall back again. So what is their endeavor? All their hard work, all their perfect timing, all their perfect arrangement is all of waste. They have to come back to this material world, and because they still had, they are a little bit elevated, so they come back, and because they don't have an active service, they come back here and they start opening hospitals and schools, and they are into the philanthropic activities. So that is also useless, because they are Nate vidum swadagatim hi Vishnu. They don't know the goal of life. The goal of life is Vishnu, worshipping Vishnu, coming to the aspect of Vishnu and engaging in the service of Vishnu. So for the yogis who can understand the purpose is not just going into Brahmajyoti, but is actually to engage in devotional service, they actually reach to Krishna. But for the yogis who are, they may endeavor so much, they do all the hard labor of controlling the mind and senses and having, performing austerities to that extent that they can be fixed up in that particular moment and that particular time, and then they leave. But they don't have any regard for the Supreme Lord's lotus feet, they will fall back. So, it is also interesting, Krishna also illustrates this example through Bhishma Deva also. Bhishma Deva is an unalloyed devotee, but when he has this ability to leave his body at his particular choice. So after the whole Kurukshetra war has been completed, he gave instructions to Yudhishthir Maharaj for 56 days, as I read in Mahabharata. So, and then after finishing his teachings, he actually prepares himself to leave at the auspicious time. But how? By focusing his mind on Krishna. And when he left, the soul came out and it actually merged into Krishna. That's what it is written. And interestingly, there Krishna, the Ganga Devi, who is the mother of Bhishma, she comes crying that, oh, my son has left. And Krishna assures him, he will never return back to this material world. He has gone back to the spiritual world. So here is also, Krishna is telling, he didn't just merge in me, he actually went through me into the spiritual world. So that is a very big lesson, for that yogis will never be happy enough just to be merging in the Brahmajyoti and just be happy there. They have to progress towards Krishna. Otherwise there is no hope. And sorry, one more point I wanted to say. Yeah. So, but what about us? We are not yogis, we are not jnanis, we are not karmis either. I mean, even just seeing today's civilization, how many people really follow karma yoga? Hardly any. But our good fortune is Krishna consciousness. How? There are three purposes in the Vedas. The three purposes is the sambandha, abhidaya and prayojana. So sambandha is the relationship with the Lord. Abhidaya is the process, how to establish that relationship with the Lord. And prayojana is the necessity for us to go back into that relationship and engage in that service. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had come to us and he gave us this ultimate necessity in the form of bhakti process. And what is the goal of the bhakti process? Prema pumarto mahan. This is the greatest necessity that for the human being, to engage in loving devotional service of the Lord. Krishna says, right, ye yata mam prapadyante tams tataiva bhajamyaham mama vattamanu vattante manushya partha sarvasya. As the men surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path only, in all respects, O Prita. So one may be karmi, one may be jnani, one may be yoga, one may be bhakta. So ultimately everyone is going back to Krishna. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has made it much more easier for us. We no need to go through all this yoga ladder, but just taking up the process of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And Srila Prabhupada also talks about his mood, why is this Krishna conscious movement is so special. In the 9th canto of the 6th chapter, where Saubhari Muni falls down and he regains his understanding that bhakti is important. In the 51st verse of the purport, Prabhupada discloses, saying that Krishna conscious movement is creating many centers to create devotees, so that by associating with members of such center, people automatically become uninterested in material affairs. Although it is very ambitious proposal, but this association is proving effective by the mercy of the Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So what is our good fortune is the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and mercy of Srila Prabhupada in the form of ISKCON, in the form of Krishna conscious movement. So what is happening by this mercy? So one is gradually associating with members of Krishna conscious movement simply by what? Simply by taking prasad and chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Even ordinary people are getting elevated. So we don't need to even become unalloyed devotees. We just need to come here, take prasad, chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra and appreciate the association of devotees. Then this mercy and this association itself will help us to become that pure devotees. We no need to even begin at that level of being a pure devotee. And Prabhupada also says that Krishna consciousness is not an option. It's not a question of whether you have to accept it or not. It's not an option. It is compulsory. And he stresses why it is compulsory. Because this is the only thing that will give us the real meaning to our existence. Otherwise, life is at risk. Say someone doesn't leave the body at an auspicious time or an auspicious situation. Then what is their situation? They go to the animal life and they circulate in this 8.4 million species of life. And then the human form of life is waste. Why have we got this intelligence? Our intelligence is not just to be engaged in eating, sleeping, mating and defending, but to question, what is my purpose of life? And so Prabhupada says everything is explained in Bhagavad-Gita. We just need to take advantage of these Shastras. When someone has finished reading Bhagavad-Gita, they have to scale themselves to go to study Srimad Bhagavatam and then further study Chaitanya Charitamrita. And studying it's not enough, but to apply those principles in our life. So today what we are aspiring is to understand the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita and to make our little endeavor to, as much as we can, to apply these principles in our life so that we are making our endeavors to go back to Godhead. Even though we may not leave at the right time, right place. It is interesting also that if someone is leaving the body, they are also facilitated by so many predominating demigods. So the fire god takes to one channel, and then from there another demigod takes from there, and then from there to another demigod. So the soul has been passing through. It is not that we leave the body and we are just gone. So it is also interesting. There is also a chain of help. But for us, what is our chain of help? Our chain of help is the Vaishnavas. Our chain of help is the Acharyas, who has left the process. And this process, because it is left by the Acharyas, it is accepted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. And I think I have mentioned this in my previous class as well. ISKCON is the boat. We just need to be sitting in this boat. At any point of time, we just need to be boarded. We don't need to leave the board. So I stop here. Any questions or comments or corrections, I'll be very happy to serve you in any little way. Please do forgive me for my shortcomings. Hare Krishna. Any questions or comments? Yes. Yeah. In the boat. Yes. Thank you, Prabhu. Sir. So Prabhu is mentioning ISKCON is the boat, and if we should never leave the boat. If we leave the boat, the water is full of crocodiles. So if we understand that, so we should always be on the boat itself, not to leave.
Inside, not to the edge. Don't go by the edge.
Yes. So also in the boat, just be inside the boat, not to the edge, so that you may trip over and fall.
No, not close to the Mayas, otherwise you will be captured by that.
Yeah. So
Can it come in the form of crocodiles also?
Can come, but this is the analogy given to be that not to try material world and material thing and spiritual. Both things, that's like staying in the boat, and you may be captured by the material thing so much that you might leave this consciousness. It can happen that.
yeah.
So we have to try to stay away from it as much as possible.
Yeah. I was also thinking, as you just mentioned, just one point, that somehow or the other we have to develop some more faith in the process. That's the only thing.
Yeah, that will keep us even more.
Yeah. But the faith also comes by the mercy. So it's
Is it mentioned somewhere that is there exact or best time to leave the body?
Yeah, like this next few verses you will be seeing during the Uttarayan time and in the Sukla Paksha. If you leave, that's very auspicious.
But that only Vishnu Pitamba was there that Icham with you. But not ordinary devotees.
That's why we don't need to worry about it. For devotees, we don't need to worry about this. Yeah, Krishna will take care of us.
What said Vishnu there? What told you Vishnu?
Bhishma Dev left during the Uttarayan period. So he's saying that only Bhishma was able to leave the body like that.
So it's not that Bhishma Dev was waiting for Uttarayan. He was waiting for Krishna, that's all.
Yes.
It's not that he was waiting for Krishna to come. That is then Krishna will come.
But he has this ability to leave the body at his will.
Yeah, it is.
At his will, yes.
It was not like he was not giving importance of this Uttarayan. He was giving an example that he was waiting for Krishna. And Krishna will come, then he will leave.
Maybe Krishna has planned for this time, Uttarayan, then he will come there.
Yeah.
No, it means Uttarayan is better than Krishna.
No. But this is also the part of system of Krishna.
System of Krishna.
So,
One should respect definitely the system. This system is for yogis and other people. Those who are not proper understanding of Krishna. That's why Krishna devotee don't have to worry about this. Just focus on Krishna.
but my understanding, maybe you can correct me, my understanding when I read Mahabharata, Krishna planned in such a way that after instructing Yudhishthir Maharaj, that was the Uttarayan period, and he actually told Bhishma Pitama that now you prepare yourself to leave the body. When he left the body, his soul actually merged into him, and then his mother came running, crying that, my son, I lost my son. Then he says that no, he didn't leave, he went to the spiritual world back up there, and you no need to worry, he won't come back here. So what my understanding at that in that context was, he wanted to show to the people, even of the yogis, if you live only at this point of time without having devotion to me, you just go to Brahmajyoti. But if you have devotion towards me, then you actually, even though you see he's merging in me, but he actually will retain his position in spiritual world. So that is also, I understood that lesson, but
You understood that Uttarayan is also important thing.
yeah, everything is part of Krishna's system. So unless Krishna gives empowerment for that particular time, it won't be empowered, right? Yeah, but again, as how you mentioned, Prabhu, like, this is not about Krishna. Krishna can change. That's why the devotees, that's why Prabhupada says, unalloyed devotees can leave at any point of time. And Krishna also shows in the 28th that for you no need to worry, Arjuna. So he's showing both importance of the system, what he has created, and at the same time how he is above the systems.
Definitely we should respect the system of the Krishna that made. Definitely devotees must respect
Yes.
system that what Krishna made.
Uttarayan is a planet, is a part of planetary system, isn't it?
No, Uttarayan is the direction where the sun moves. Uttarayan is
planetary system.
my understanding is Uttarayan is the direction of the sun moving towards north. When sun is moving towards north, it's called Uttarayan. When sun is moving towards the south, it's called Dakshinayan.
And Krishna is the director of the planetary system.
Yeah.
He has established all the system. And that's why this sun and moon, they move because of my fear accurately.
Yeah.
They don't deviate at all. Whatever he has planned or what he has given the position, the access to move, they move accurately.
So many yugas, this earth is rotating the same way, all the other grahas also.
When new creation comes, same thing happens.
Yes. Thank you again for your assembly of Vaishnavas. Please do forgive me for all my offenses and shortcomings. Hare Krishna.